Under a JCT contract, if PC is not achieved and no EOT is in place, damages are no longer applicable due to time being at large, which means that no LADs can be deducted.
When listening to this intro, we can see there are a high number of acronyms and terms that can be incredibly confusing when starting your career as a quantity surveyor in the construction industry. This can be during meetings and day-to-day discussions, and these can take some time to get to grips with. So during this video, we're going to explain over 100 of these terms and acronyms in detail with a view to supporting new quantity surveyors starting their career within the construction industry. And during the video, we'll provide a high-level overview, but if you want to improve your understanding in more detail, please download a copy of the free guide in the link in the description below that explains each of these terms in further detail to really help build your understanding. And I really hope you found these resources useful. So the first term or acronym we'll take a look at is LOI, which stands for Letter of Intent. And in construction, an LOI or Letter of Intent is a document expressing the intention to enter into a formal construction contract, often allowing preliminary work to begin before the full contract is finalised. And it outlines the preliminary understanding between the client and contractor regarding the project and its scope. And it's often used for long leading items such as structural steel work so that manufacturing can commence prior to contract terms being agreed. The next acronym we'll take a look at is DLP, which stands for Defects Liability Period, and this is a specific time frame usually outlined in the construction contract after the project's practical completion, where the contractor is responsible for rectifying any defects that arise in their work. And this typically lasts for a period of 12 months, however it is dependent on the terms of the construction contracts in place. The next acronym we'll take a look at is CVR, which stands for Cost Value Reconciliation, and this is a process where a project's actual costs are compared to the estimated budget in order to assess the project's financial health and to identify any potential issues. And the CVR helps in monitoring project progress, profitability, and identifying any areas where adjustments are needed. If you're serious about starting your career as a quantity surveyor or advancing your career up to a senior QS level, we put together a question and answers study guide containing all of the essential information you need to know during a job interview from a graduate all the way up to a senior QS level. This guide contains over 300 technical questions and answers you may be asked within a QS job interview and has been developed over the last 15 years of attending QS job interviews as a recruiting managing surveyor. The guide has been specifically put together for both graduate surveyors wanting to start their career and intermediate surveyors wanting to advance to a senior QS level. As well as over 300 questions and answers, the guide also contains access to video mock interviews, CV templates and covering letter templates, and hundreds of resources to help you start your career in quantity surveying and to advance your career to a senior level. Grab it now using the link in the description below. The next term we'll take a look at is BCIS, which stands for Building Cost Information Service, and this is a UK-based organisation that provides cost information for the built environment, and the BCIS collects, analyses and interprets cost information to help clients in the construction industry make informed decisions. They offer various services including online applications, data licensing, publications and consultancy services. The next acronym we'll take a look at is L&E, which stands for Loss and Expense, and this refers to a claim made by a contractor for financial compensation due to delays or disruptions caused by the client or other factors outside the contractor's control. And this claim can cover costs like increased overhead, loss of profit, and other expenses related to the project's extended timeline. The next acronym we'll take a look at is LADs, which stands for Liquidated and Ascertained Damages, and these are pre-agreed amounts of money that a contractor must pay to the client if they fail to complete the work by the agreed completion date. And this is a common clause in construction contracts aiming to provide certainty and clarity regarding the financial consequences of any delays. The following term we'll take a look at is retention. And retention refers to a portion of payment withheld from a contractor until the completion of a project, and this ensures that the contractor fulfills all obligations and addresses any defects. This withheld amount, typically between 3 to 10% of the contract price, incentivises contractors to complete the work to the agreed upon standards and provide a financial safeguard for the client in case of any issues. And the next term we'll take a look at is VE, which stands for value engineering. And in construction, this is a systematic process focused on maximising the value of a project by reducing costs whilst maintaining or improving the functionality and quality of the building. It involves analysing a project's design, materials and processes to identify opportunities for cost savings without compromising the project's overall performance for the client's needs. The next acronym we'll take a look at is CSA, which stands for Contract Sum Analysis. This provides a breakdown of the contract sum into component parts to aid with interim valuations and cost management of the project. The next term we'll take a look at is Prime Cost Sum. And a prime cost sum is an allowance included in a contract for the supply of materials or goods for the work of a nominated subcontractor. And this is included where the exact specification or cost of the items in question are not yet known. And this is normally included on items such as bricks, which are included at a cost per 1,000, or roof tiles, which again can be included at a cost per 1,000 units. And this can then subsequently be adjusted when the specification of the product is known. The next term we'll take a look at is an undefined provisional sum. And this is a provisional sum for work that is not clearly defined in the contract documents and usually requires design development. Undefined provisional sums are less well described as they refer to work which is not completely designed, and as such the contractor cannot be expected to make allowance for them in their programming, planning and pricing of preliminaries. This means the contractor may be entitled to an extension of time or additional payment when the actual works are undertaken. In contrast to this, a defined provisional sum are those which have been described in sufficient detail that the contractor is expected to have made allowances in their programming, planning and prelims, and the work may not yet have been completely designed. The nature of the construction work will typically be known, and how the works are fixed to the building and in what quantity will also be typically established when the contract sum is entered into. The next term we'll take a look at is payment notice, and a payment notice is issued by the paying party detailing the amount they propose to pay and how this has been calculated. In contrast, a pay less notice is a notice served by the paying party indicating their intention to pay less than the amount claimed, with reasons and their calculations for this. The next term we'll take a look at is MCD, which stands for Main Contractor's Discount, and this is a discount offered by the main contractor, usually deducted from subcontractor or supplier costs. The next term we'll take a look at is Vesting Certificate, and this is a legal document that confirms ownership of goods, materials or assets even before they are delivered to the site or fully paid for. It's primarily used in construction and manufacturing to protect ownership rights when goods are manufactured or purchased off-site but haven't yet been delivered or fully paid for. The next acronym we'll take a look at is PCG, which stands for Parent Company Guarantee, and this is a guarantee provided by the parent company of a contractor to assure the client of the performance of their contract obligations. The next term we'll review is Performance Bond, and this is a financial instrument issued usually by a bank or insurer or bondsman that guarantees compensation to the client if the contractor fails to meet the terms of the contract. The next term we'll take a look at is Practical Completion, also commonly referred to as PC. And practical completion is a stage in a construction project when the works are complete, except for minor defects, allowing the building to be occupied or used by the client. And the next term we'll take a look at is Sectional Completion. And this is the completion of distinct sections of the project at different times, often with separate handovers and practical completion dates. The next term we'll take a look at is Time at Large, and this concept relates to a legal situation where no fixed completion date exists, and typically due to an invalid or absent extension of time provision, this means that the contractor must complete the project within a reasonable time only, and that liquidated damages can no longer be deducted for the period of delay, as there is no revised completion date when they need to complete the project by. The next term we'll take a look at is Underhand, and this refers to contracts signed by parties, not as a deed, And generally, the limitation period of these contracts is 6 years or less, whereas contracts executed as a deed are executed with specific formalities, typically under seal and signed by a director with supporting witnesses, and these contracts typically have a limitation period of 12 years. The next acronym we'll take a look at is MOS, meaning Materials Offsite, and this is a reference to materials purchased and stored off-site but intended for the project. They are often eligible for payment if properly documented. The acronym PC refers to practical completion, and this signifies a point where a building project is deemed to be complete except for minor defects that can be easily fixed without significantly disrupting the building's use. It's essentially the stage where the building is ready for its intended purpose and can be occupied. The acronym BOQ stands for Bill of Quantities, and this is a document used in tendering and within the contract documentation that itemises the materials, parts and labour costs that are required to complete the project. The acronym EOT stands for Extension of Time, and this is a formal request or entitlement that extends the contract period due to delays. We'll now take a look at the acronym TPI, which stands for Tender Price Index, and this is a measure of the movement of prices in tenders for construction contracts, and it tracks the prices agreed between a client and a contractor at the point of committing to a construction project, essentially reflecting the cost to the client when they accept a tender. TPIs are crucial for understanding trends in construction costs over time and are used to inform project planning, budgeting and procurement. The term lead-in time refers to the period between initiating a request or order for materials, equipment or services and the date that they are actually delivered to the construction site. It's essentially a representation of the time needed before work can begin on a specific task or activity that relies on those ordered items. The next term we'll take a look at is mobilisation, and this refers to the period and activities undertaken after a contractor is selected but before work can commence. It involves preparing the site, establishing necessary infrastructure, organising resources to ensure a smooth start to the actual construction phase. And the next term we'll take a look at is decant, and in construction, decanting refers to the temporary relocation of people and or equipment from a building or site to allow for construction, renovation or demolition work. It involves moving occupants, residents, staff or students and potentially their belongings to alternative accommodation while the work is carried out, and this is often necessary when the existing space is deemed unsafe or unsuitable for continued use during the construction process. The term snagging in construction refers to the process of identifying and documenting minor defects, imperfections or unfinished tasks in a newly built or renovated property. It's essentially a final quality control check before handover, ensuring everything is completed to the expected standard, and these snags can range from cosmetic issues like paint splatters to more functional problems like doors not closing properly. And critical path refers to the longest sequence of dependent tasks that must be completed on time for the entire project to finish within the planned schedule. It essentially identifies the shortest possible time to complete a project, as any delay on the critical path will directly impact the overall project completion. The term preliminary items, often called prelims, refers to the costs and resources needed for a project setup and ongoing operations that are not directly part of the finished structure. These include site management, temporary facilities, safety measures and other essential overheads. Essentially, they are the behind-the-scenes elements that enable the physical construction to proceed smoothly and safely. Attendances. Attendances refers to the services or resources that a main contractor provides to a subcontractor or supplier, often on a fee-based arrangement. These attendances can include things like providing access to utilities, site facilities, or even specific equipment. It's essentially a way to streamline work and manage costs by having the main contractor handle certain shared resources or services that multiple parties on the project would need. Procurement. Procurement refers to the process of acquiring all the necessary goods and services needed to complete a construction project. This includes everything from selecting contractors and suppliers to negotiating contracts and managing the overall supply chain. Effective procurement ensures projects are completed on time, within budget, and to the required quality standards. Tendering. Tendering is a formal process where a client or project owner invites bids from contractors to undertake a specific project. This involves a client issuing a request for tender or invitation to tender, and this outlines the project's scope, requirements, and specifications. And contractors then submit their proposals, including pricing and timelines, and these are to be evaluated by the client. The tendering process ensures a competitive and transparent selection of the most suitable contractor for the job. We'll now take a look at the acronym BIM, which stands for Building Information Modelling, and this is a digital representation of physical and functional characteristics of a facility or building. This allows the different elements of the building to be interrogated via a 3D model, which is often accessible online. RFI. RFI stands for a request for information, and this is a formal request for clarification on project-related matters. The acronym VO typically stands for Variation Order, and this is a formal document outlining changes to the original scope of work agreed in the contract. And the next acronym we'll take a look at is RICS, and this stands for Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, which is a professional body that accredits professionals within the land, property, construction and infrastructure sectors. MRICS, and this stands for Member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, which is a professional designation awarded by the RICS, which is a globally recognised professional body for land, property, construction and infrastructure. Achieving MRICS status signifies that an individual has met the rigorous standards of education, training and professional competence required by the RICS. The acronym JCT stands for Joint Contracts Tribunal, and the JCT is a body that develops and publishes standard forms of construction contracts, and these contracts are widely used in the UK construction industry to define the terms and conditions of building projects between employers and contractors. NEC. NEC stands for New Engineering Contracts, which is a series of contracts developed to manage projects, particularly in civil engineering, and it's designed to promote collaboration, clarity and efficient project management while minimising any disputes. The NEC contracts are a family of standard forms of contract that define legal relationships and reflect best practices in procurement and project management. PEP. This stands for Project Execution Plan and is a document that outlines a strategy for how a construction project will be executed, managed and controlled, including any details on scope, schedule, budget and many more details. We'll now take a look at the acronym GIA, and this stands for Gross Internal Area. It refers to the total area of a building measured to the internal face of the perimeter walls at each floor level, and this includes the internal walls and partitions, and essentially it's the total enclosed area within a building, excluding only the thickness of the external walls. GEA. This stands for Gross External Area, and this refers to the total area of a building measured externally at each floor level. This measurement includes the thickness of perimeter walls and external projections, as well as internal features like walls, columns and stairwells. Essentially, it's the entire footprint of the building, including all structural elements. NIA. This stands for Net Internal Area, and this refers to the usable space within a building measured to the inside face of the perimeter walls, and this excludes structural elements like walls and columns, and includes all areas used for a specific purpose. It's the area that can be rented or sold, and for which rent or purchase price is normally calculated. PQS. PQS stands for Professional Quantity Surveyor, and PQSs are consultants who specialise in managing the costs and contractual aspects of construction projects, acting as a client's representative. They play a crucial role in ensuring projects are completed within budget and according to contractual obligations. QS or CQS. This refers to a contractor's quantity surveyor who manages the financial and contractual aspects of construction projects, focusing on maximising value for the contractor while ensuring adherence to the budget and legal standards. They work on behalf of the contractor ensuring costs are controlled, variations are managed, and payments are processed efficiently. And the term relevant event is a contractual term referred to under JCT forms of contracts, and these are listed relevant events such as adverse weather or changes in law that may entitle the contractor to claim an extension of time. The term compensation event is listed under a NEC form of contract, and a compensation event entitles a contractor to claim a change in the price, completion date, or both. The term set-off is a contractual right allowing one party to deduct amounts owed to them from sums otherwise payable to the other party. The acronym EA typically stands for Employer's Agent, and this is the person appointed to administer the contract on behalf of the employer under certain forms of contract, like a JCT design and build. The term CPs refers to contractors' proposals, and under a design and build contract, this is the design and technical proposals submitted by the contractor in response to the employer's requirements. The term ERs refers to the employer's requirements, and this is a document listed under a design and build contract outlining the employer's needs and expectations. The acronym CDP refers to contractor's design portion, and this is part of the work that the contractor is responsible for designing in a contract. The acronym FOC stands for free of charge, and this is items or services provided at no cost, often included as part of a broader contractual agreement. The acronym AI typically stands for Architect's Instruction, and this is a formal instruction issued by the architect to the contractor to carry out additional or varied work. The acronym PI typically stands for Professional Indemnity Insurance, and this is insurance covering professionals against claims for negligence or breach of duty in their services. The acronym EL stands for Employers Liability Insurance, and this is insurance that covers employers against liability for injury or illness suffered by employees at work. The acronym PPE stands for Personal Protective Equipment, and this typically refers to helmets, gloves and goggles used to protect individuals when visiting site. The acronym BEP stands for BIM Execution Plan, and this outlines how BIM will be implemented during the project. The acronym CAD stands for Computer Aided Design, and this is technology used for creating precision drawings or technical illustrations. The acronym MEP stands for Mechanical, Electrical and Plumbing, and these are all key disciplines in building services engineering. RIBA stands for Royal Institute of British Architects, a professional body for architects primarily in the UK. ICE stands for Institution of Civil Engineers, a UK-based international organisation for civil engineers. The acronym LOA stands for Letter of Acceptance, and this is a formal communication that a tender has been accepted. The acronym PM stands for Project Manager, the person responsible for leading a project. The acronym CO stands for Change Order, which is a document to record an amendment to the contract. The acronym VAT stands for Value Added Tax, which is a tax applied to goods and services within the UK. The acronym HSE stands for Health, Safety and Environment. The acronym KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator, and these are metrics that are used to evaluate the performance of a project or a supplier. The acronym NCR stands for Non-Conformance Report, which is issued when work does not comply with the specifications or the contract requirements. The acronym CPA stands for Critical Path Analysis, which determines the longest stretch of dependent activities during the project. RIBA Stage 0 or RIBA Stage 0 refers to the strategic definition phase, and this is where the identification of the client's business case and strategic brief to determine the best means for achieving the desired outcomes is discussed. RIBA Stage 1 refers to the preparation and brief stage, and this is where the development of the initial project brief takes place, an assessment of site information is carried out, and a review of the overall project feasibility is undertaken. RIBA Stage 2 refers to the concept design, which is where initial concept drawings are outlined, proposals for structural, design, building service systems and outline specifications are also undertaken. RIBA Work Stage 3 refers to spatial coordination, and this is where the design is developed further. Coordination of architectural and engineering information is also undertaken to ensure compliance with any building regulations. RIBA Work Stage 4 is the technical design, where technical drawings and specifications are developed. RIBA Work Stage 5 is the manufacturing and construction phase, where the construction of the building is undertaken. RIBA Work Stage 6 is the handover phase, where the complete project is handed over to the client. And RIBA Stage 7 is the use phase, where the building is in use and there is ongoing maintenance and performance reviews that may be carried out. The term preambles is a body of text included within a bill of quantities that provides context and standard specifications for the measured items. The acronym D&B stands for Design and Build, which is a procurement route where the contractor is responsible for both the design and construction of the project. The term adverse weather. An adverse weather claim is a claim made by the contractor for an extension of time due to weather conditions that prevent the work from proceeding. Contractors' all risk insurance is a comprehensive insurance policy covering property damage and third-party claims arising from construction activities. That brings us towards the end of the acronyms. I really hope you found this video useful, and please subscribe to the channel to receive ongoing QS support. Cases, for example, for charity organisations, VAT may not even be applicable. As QSs, we would not be in a position to know the correct rate of VAT unless informed of it, and that is why VAT is typically excluded when preparing a cost estimate. The next question we'll take a look at is going into construction technology experience, and under this section, the first question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain the different types of pile foundations? And to address this, candidates can make reference to sheet piles, secant piles, board piles, and precast piles. The next question we'll take a look at under this section is, how does CFA board piles work? And CFA is reference to continuous flight auger piles. And to address this, candidates can first of all advise that CFA piles are constructed by rotating a hollow stem continuous flight auger into the soil. This bores out subsoils to a design depth, and concrete or grout is then pumped through the hollow stem, maintaining static head pressure. This then fills the cylindrical cavity created as the auger is then slowly removed. What advice would you give to a client who is wanting to know the technical disadvantages of a steel frame construction? And to address this, the candidates could advise that the disadvantages of steel frames include that steel frames require fire protection. Certain parts of the steel frame may need replacing over time. The price of steel is highly variable and can fluctuate, resulting in increased cost uncertainty. There is typically a need for experienced builders and specialist steel frame installers that typically carries a higher installation cost than alternative methods. And because of this specialism, this resource may be harder to acquire than other forms. The next question we'll take a look at is, what different forms of fire protection are you aware of that can be used on steel frames? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that they are aware of intumescent paint, fire protective boarding, SFRM or spray applied fire resistant material. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please tell me what elements you would typically include within an interim valuation? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that the interim valuation would typically include preliminary items, the measured works items, any variation items, materials on site, materials off site, and any loss and expense claims. The next question we'll take a look at is, how would you advise your clients on using standard versus bespoke forms of contract? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that this would be dependent on the client's objectives, and we would typically as a QS make them aware of the implications of both options and advise them accordingly. For example, standard forms are written by legal experts. The rights and obligations of each party are clearly set out to the required level of detail. Any risks should have been allocated appropriately between the parties under a standard form, and parties should be familiar with the provisions in the form, which provides greater consistency in application and fewer unforeseen anomalies. The time and expense of preparing a fresh document for each project is also avoided. There's also the fact that case law is built up over time on standard forms, which provides a good source of knowledge and clarity of the terms. Can you please explain which items must be in place before liquidated damages can be deducted? And to address this, candidates can advise that a non-completion certificate and a payless notice must both be in place under a JCT contract in order for LADs to be deducted. The next question we'll take a look at is how would you value materials off-site within an interim valuation? And to address this, candidates can advise that when valuing materials off-site during the project, we would need to obtain proof of ownership that the materials would transfer to the employer upon payment, for example, a vesting certificate. Insurances must also be in place until the materials arrive at site. Materials must clearly be labelled as being intended for the site and set apart from other materials, and a materials off-site bond must be in place if required under the terms of the contract. The next question we'll take a look at is what items would you normally include within a cost report or a financial statement? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that they would typically report on the contract sum, any instructed variations, potential future variations as advance warnings, any claims, the anticipated final account total, and the total of the certified payments. The next question we'll take a look at is what is the purpose of a financial report? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that this is to report against budgeted values and act as a working cost check on the project budget. It's also there to give the client an understanding of any savings or additional money required, and it's there to report on contract progress against pre-contract predictions. The next question we'll take a look at is how would you advise a client on reviewing an adverse weather claim? And to address this, candidates can advise that on receipt of the claim, this would need to be supported by historical weather data, taking into account the time of year and region the project in question is located in. The contractor's claim should be based on data from a recognised independent source, such as the Met Office, and the rainfall and temperatures referenced will be compared against previous years to determine if these would adversely impact the progress of the main contractor. The prolongation period should also be equivalent to the extension of time being sought. Can you please explain your understanding of the difference between defined or undefined provisional sums? And to address this, the candidate can advise that defined provisional sums are those that are sufficiently well defined and or detailed to allow the contractor to make allowances for them in their programming, planning and pricing preliminaries. In order for a provisional sum to be defined, there will be sufficient design information to describe how the works in question is to be fixed to the building, in which location and in what quantity. This is not in place for undefined provisional sums, and therefore the contractor cannot be deemed to have included for prelims when expending a undefined provisional sum. The next question we'll take a look at is how would you measure the site cut and fill? And to address this, candidates can advise that they would obtain the project drawings, they would use the existing levels and proposed levels. This would then divide the area of excavation into a grid and populate the levels on the grid to establish an average existing and proposed level, and this is to determine which areas require excavation and which areas require imported material. The next question we'll take a look at is what is a prime cost sum? And to address this, candidates can advise that a prime cost sum is a cost of an item that has either not been selected or where the price was unknown at the time the contract was entered into. A prime contract sum is a cost of an item that has either not been selected or where the price was unknown at the time the contract was entered into. If the price of the item chosen is different than the prime cost sum, the client will pay the builder the difference plus a profit margin as stated in the contract. Typically, this is used on items such as the cost of bricks or roof tiles, where the prime cost sum is based on a cost per thousand. Is how would you advise your client on dealing with an error that was contained within the bill of quantities? And to address this, the candidate could advise that on identification of the error, they would advise a client that if identified prior to the contract being signed, then this could be discussed with the contractor and amended in accordance with the option notified within the instructions for tenderers. However, once a contract has been signed, both parties must stand by the rate within the contract, even if it was incorrect. Only through an agreement will the parties be able to amend the rate. And the next question we'll take a look at is what is meant by the acronyms GEA and GIA. And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that GEA stands for Gross External Area, and this is the area of the building measured externally at each floor level, whereas GIA stands for Gross Internal Area, and this is the area of the building measured to the internal face of the perimeter walls at each floor level. A follow-on question we may receive is where are these acronyms defined? And to address this, the candidate can advise that this is contained within the Code of Measuring Practice published by the RICS. The next question we'll take a look at is how would you advise your clients when selecting on a procurement route? And to address this, the candidate could advise that when advising clients previously, they have always been sure to give due consideration to their objectives in relation to cost, time, design control, quality assurance, and risk transfer. For example, under a design and build procurement route, this offers good risk transfer, but there are trade-offs against paying risk premiums and a loss of design control when compared to a traditional procurement route. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the traditional procurement route? And to address this, candidates can first of all advise that under a traditional procurement route, the design is completed by the client's design team before competitive tenders are invited, and a main contractor is then appointed to build what the designers have specified. The contractor takes responsibility and financial risk for the construction of the works to the design produced by the client's design team, and this is for the contract sum within the contracted period. The client takes the responsibility and risk for the design and design team performance. The next question we'll take a look at is how does the traditional procurement route work? And to address this, candidates can advise that the contractor takes responsibility and financial risk for the construction of the works to the design produced by the client's design team for the contract sum within the contracted period. And the client takes responsibility and risk for the design and design team performance. And over on the flow diagram, we can see that the client has direct relationships with both the client has separate relationships with the architect and direct links to the main contractor, who have separate responsibility for both the design on the architect side and the construction on the main contractor's side. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain the advantages of traditional procurement? And to address this, candidates can advise, first of all, that a key advantage is that the client retains control over the design, which can lead to higher quality. There are also increased levels of cost certainty prior to commencement, and design changes are reasonably easy to arrange and value. Please explain the disadvantages of traditional procurement. And to address this, candidates can advise that the overall project duration may be longer than others due to lack of overlap between design and construction, and there is no input into design and planning by the contractor. A strategy based on price competition can also lead to adversarial relations during the post-contract construction period, and there is also a dual point of responsibility with the design team controlling the design and the contractor retaining responsibility for the construction, which can lead to separate team dynamics. The next question we'll take a look at is, what is design and build procurement? And to address this, candidates can advise that design and build is where the contractor is responsible for both the design, planning, organisation, control and construction of the works to the employer's requirements. The employer gives the tenderers the employer's requirements, and the contractor responds with the contractor's proposals, which include the price for the works. Over on the flow diagram, we can see that the client has a single relationship with the main contractor, and it's the main contractor who has direct links with the architect, meaning that they are both responsible for the design and the construction of the works under design and build procurement. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain the advantages of design and build? And to address this, candidates can advise, firstly, that there is a single point of responsibility for the design and construction. There is earlier commencement on site. There is earlier price certainty, which is increased due to the main contractor being committed to a fixed price lump sum. And the client can also benefit from the contractor's experience harnessed during the design phase. The next question we'll take a look at is what are the disadvantages of design and build? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that clients may find it hard to prepare a sufficiently comprehensive brief. The client has to commit to a concept design early on in the process. Variations from the original brief are difficult to arrange and are often expensive. It is also harder to compare tenders and harder to determine whether value for money is being achieved. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of management contracting procurement? And to address this, candidates can advise that the management contractor has direct contractual links with all of the works contractors, and they have responsibility for the construction of the works without actually carrying them out. Not all of the design needs to be completed for the works to commence, and the main contractor selects the works contractors through competitive open book tender. The client reimburses the cost of these packages to the main contractor plus their management fee. We can see over on the flow diagram that the client has a direct relationship with the management contractor, who then subsequently organises the separate individual works packages. The next question we'll take a look at is, what are the advantages of management contracting? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that the overall project duration is shorter due to overlapping design and construction. There is contractor contribution to the design and planning process. Changes can be accommodated in packages not yet let, providing that they have no impact on the packages that are previously let. And the works are let competitively at current market prices on a firm price basis. The next question we'll take a look at is, what are the disadvantages of management contracting? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that the price for the works is not received until the last package has been let, which reduces cost certainty for the client. Changes to the design of later packages may affect packages already previously let, and there is little incentive for the management contractor to reduce costs. In practice, the main contractor has little legal responsibility for the defaults of the works contractors. Can you please explain your understanding of construction management? And to address this, candidates first of all can advise that in construction management, the employer places a direct contract with each of the trade contractors and utilises the expertise of a construction manager who acts as a consultant to coordinate the contracts. The trade contractors carry out the construction works, and the construction managers supervises the construction process and coordinates the design team. The construction manager has no contractual links with the trade contractors or members of the design team. Their role includes preparation of the programme, determining requirements for site facilities, breaking down the project into suitable works packages, obtaining and evaluating tenders, and coordinating and supervising the works. The next question we'll take a look at is, what are the advantages of construction management procurement? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that the overall project duration is reduced by overlapping design and construction. The construction manager can contribute to the design and project planning processes. Roles, risks and relationships for all parties are clear, and changes in design can be accommodated without paying a premium. Prices may also be lower due to direct contracts with trade contractors, and the client has a means of redress to trade contractors through direct contractual links. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the disadvantages of construction management? And to address this, candidates can advise that price certainty is not achieved until the last trade package is let. Changes to packages may adversely affect packages that have already been previously let. The client must be proactive and hands-on, as they have many contractual links to each of the trade packages, and the client has a lot of consultants and contractors to deal with. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of single-stage tendering? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that single-stage tendering is a structured process of receiving competitive tenders from a number of pre-selected capable contractors. Contractors are pre-selected based on their financial standing, qualifications and certifications, the previous track record and references, an organisational structure, and capacity and resources. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain the advantages of single stage tendering? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly, it ensures only capable and approved firms submit tenders, and it tends to reduce the aggregate cost of tendering. And it reduces the risk of receiving tenders from unsuitable contractors. The next question we'll take a look at is, what is two-stage tendering? And to address this, candidates can advise that two-stage tendering is where the client seeks to appoint the contractor based on an outlined scope of work that is not yet fully defined. The client then works with the appointed contractor to develop the scope of work and reach an agreed price. This can be used when it is useful to obtain the contractor's buildability experience on the planning of the project and gain an earlier contractor involvement. Please explain your understanding of the purpose of the first stage of two-stage tendering. And to address this, candidates can advise that the first stage is where the client provides an outline project design to each of the tenderers. And the tendering contractors will submit prices for helping the client develop and finalise the design using their buildability experience. Tender submissions will typically consist of a schedule of rates that will be used to calculate the agreed price during stage 2, and a price for assisting the client with design development and buildability expertise during stage 2. Confirmation of the contractor's overheads and profit percentages will also typically be provided at this stage. A preferred contractor is then appointed to assist with developing the design further during the second stage. The next question we'll take a look at is, what is the purpose of the second stage of two-stage tendering? And to address this, candidates can advise that following development of the design to a defined stage, a formal negotiation process is undertaken during stage 2, and this is to agree the final price, the contract conditions, and the programme. What is negotiated tendering? And to address this, candidates can advise that this is where the client has an existing preference for appointing a particular firm and only negotiates with one contractor. The next question we'll take a look at is, how does negotiated tendering work? And to address this, candidates can advise that this is when the contractor has carried out work successfully for the client previously and where they have an existing relationship. There is no competition and only one contractor is invited to tender. The contract sum is arrived at by a process of negotiation, and a schedule of rates or prices from previous projects may be used as a basis of agreeing a price. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of serial tendering? And to address this, candidates can advise that serial tendering is where contractors are asked to bid for a project on the basis that if they complete their initial project satisfactorily, other projects of a similar type will follow and the same bill rates will be applied. The next question we'll take a look at is, what issues could selecting the main contractor lead to? And to address this, candidates can advise that this could create a bad client and contractor relationship. It could also lead to a dissatisfied client, and it could also lead and result in the insolvency of the main contractor. Next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the form of tender? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that the form of tender is a pre-printed formal statement in which the tenderer fills in the blank spaces. And the tenderer provides their name, address, and the sum of money for which they offer to carry out the works. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the term the employer's requirements? And to address this, candidates can advise that the employer's requirements set out the client's requirements, including the function, size, accommodation, and quality requirements of the project. Their level of detail depends on how much design development has been carried out prior to tender, and they normally include the current state of planning permission and also detail the level of design, structure, and specification information to be provided by the tenderers. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the contractor's proposals? And to address this, candidates can advise that the CPs or contractor's proposals are the contractor's response to the employer's requirements. They are the key documentation for the client to consider at tender review, and they often include plans, elevations, sections, and typical details. Layout drawings and specification for materials and workmanship are also provided. The next question we'll take a look at is, after evaluation has been undertaken and a payment certificate has been issued, we have a scenario where the client has advised that they don't have sufficient funding to make the payment, and how would you respond as a QS in this scenario? To address this, candidates can advise firstly that once the certificate has been issued to the contractor, the client is contractually obliged to honour the payment of the payment certificate and cannot withhold money without a valid reason. If this were the case, I would contact the client and contractor as soon as possible to arrange some form of payment. It may be the case that the client has insufficient funds available in time for the final payment date. However, it may be possible to defer the payment by 1 to 2 days. However, failing this, or if the contractor is unwilling to delay, the client would need to find finance to make the payment. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain which items you would include within evaluation? And to address this, candidates can advise that typically evaluation would include prelims, measured works, materials on-site and off-site, any variations, claims, retention, and previous payments made. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the defects liability period? And to address this, candidates can advise that the defects liability period is a duration at the end of the contract, usually 52 weeks after the substantial completion certificate has been issued, whereby the contractor undertakes to rectify any defects that arise within the structure at the contractor's expense. And this is providing that the defects were due to materials and workmanship not being in accordance with the contract. In the event that the contractor failed to rectify any defects, the employer may employ another contractor to carry out the works and recover the cost of doing this from the main contractor. The retention money being retained may be used to cover the cost of making good. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain when you would use a JCT minor works contract? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that a JCT minor works would be used typically projects that are short in duration on a small scale with a straightforward construction. JCT guidance advises that a minor works form is used typically for contract values up to £200,000 where the works are simple in nature. The contract must be in lump sum form where design should be completed prior to execution, and the employer or their team is to provide specifications, drawings and schedules of works. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of when you would use a JCT intermediate contract? And to address this, candidates can advise that the intermediate form is recommended for projects that do not exceed a 1-year duration. The projects should be simple in content and require only basic skills and trades, where services are not complex and where the works are already designed. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain when you would typically use a JCT design and build contract? And to address this, candidates can advise that a JCT design and build would typically be used when the contractor is responsible for design and construction. The project should be similar in complexity to that of a standard building contract, and the contractor's proposals form the basis of the contract. There is no mention of an architect or QS, and instead, this role is replaced by the title of the employer's agent. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the term cost value reconciliation? And to address this, candidates can advise that a cost value reconciliation is used to measure the project's ongoing costs and income against budgeted values at the start of the project. This allows the profitability of the project to be determined at a given point in time throughout the project lifecycle. The next question we'll take a look at is, how would you prepare a cost value reconciliation? And to address this, candidates can advise firstly that they would determine the cumulative costs and value of the project to a set given point in time. The cut-off date may coincide with an agreed accounting period or month-end period, and this would typically be established with the project team. I would then carry out cost checks to ensure, firstly, that no high-value fluctuations in costs or value are expected during the reporting period, that all work in progress is accounted for and the reported values are in line with subcontractors' measures and liabilities. Any risk and contingency items must have been included for for any items not yet agreed. And when all costs and value items are finalised, I would then determine the current profitability of the project and compare this against the original budgeted values. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the term cash flow analysis? And to address this, candidates can advise that a cash flow analysis is used to calculate the project incomes, and we could look to utilise the agreed payment schedule set out under the terms of the contract, the programme and the bill of quantities or activity schedule. This could then be used to accurately profile when the income is anticipated to be received and plot these dates on the cash flow forecast. If this information is not available, it may be possible to use information such as a cash flow analysis software to plot a typical S-curve. And for the outgoings, I would liaise with the supply chain to gain an insight of when invoices and payments are expected to become due, and taking extra care to account for any long lead items. And the next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the term accruals? And to address this, candidates can advise that accruals are made within the financial accounting systems that are operated to take into account any anticipated invoices that are not yet paid to date. The accrual can be calculated as a difference in the total liability that is due to a subcontractor or supplier against the amount already paid to date. And the accruals are retained as anticipated cash outflows not yet incurred, and in theory, the older the accruals are, the less likely they are to be paid and may be released at a given point in time. The next question we'll take a look at is, can you please explain your understanding of the term contra charge? And to address this, candidates can advise that contra charges are issued as a deduction to a subcontractor's works package as a result of a cost item that has been incurred due to their activity on site. For example, a contra charge could be issued due to damage of property or equipment due to a subcontractor's failure to put in place adequate protection of their working area. That brings us towards the end of the Q&A practice. I really hope you found this video useful, and please be sure to subscribe to this channel to receive ongoing Q&A support.